Hey everybody, so we are now back for part 2 of the deposition transcript excerpts that were attached to the motion for summary judgment. I'm in the process of arranging therapy after reading part 1 and all the stuff I now learned about Ryan Reynolds, his temper and his sex life. But here we're going to start here now with who have we got? We have the ones that are unsealed are Steve Sarowitz, Jen Abel, and Melissa Nathan. Everyone else is there might be. Hold on, let me just check a minute. There may be one or two others. I will look, but yeah, we'll just start here because I've got Jen Abel's in front of me. These are not as long as the Baldoni and Heath ones, and I haven't read them, but yeah, I'm hoping they got just as much tea in them though. So we're going to start halfway through a question. I don't know. Oh, Gottlieb. So it's Gottlieb and Friedman are here with Jen Abel, and this is page 38. Just to remind you, it does jump from page to page, so I may start halfway through and answer a question, and then it might cut off abruptly at the end, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so halfway through a question. Like you don't like the person's past or their history or their reputation. Friedman, objection. I think to better answer your question as a personal publicist, I'm able to make decisions based on who I think I'm able to represent based on my aligning values. Okay, do you like a background investigation or look into your clients when you have new opportunities presented to you? I think the extent of my ability to do a background investigation is to Google. I'm sure I've done that in the past. Okay, when did you first meet Justin Baldoni? In 2020. What were the circumstances in which you met him? I became his publicist and started running his account. How did that come about? Okay. Okay. Sorry, my throat is still really sore. Okay, when did you first meet Justin Baldoni? In 2020. What were the circumstances in which you met him? I became his publicist, started running his account. How did that come about? When I was employed at Jones Works, I'm going to make this a bit bigger. I was hired to oversee entire talent and entertainment department, and he was the talent client at the time. Okay, do you remember when in 2020 this was? I believe I was hired at the end of July 2020, so it would have been sometime around that time period. And were you introduced to Mr. Baldoni through someone at Jones Works, or how did that come about? I'm trying to remember. I apologise. The first time that I met him, I believe there was a photo shoot and I came to set, and that was the first time that we met. But again, that's a long time ago, so I'd have to think more about that, and I can correct that later. Do you remember where that was? I do not. Sorry. Did you meet anyone else at Wayfarer Studios when you were brought in 2020 to work with Mr. Baldoni? Objection. So I don't recall the exact date of when I was introduced to the Wayfarer team. Yeah, I apologise. I don't recall the exact date. At that time in 2020, were you representing Mr. Baldoni personally, or Wayfarer Studios, or some combination of both? At Jones Works, they were the same. They were the same kind of contract, the same agreement, so I oversaw them as one client. Okay, when did you first meet Jamie Heath? Again, I'd have to refresh my memory when he joined Jones Works. I apologise, I don't have that date readily available. Do you know what year it might have been in? Yeah, I would say, oh gosh, time flies. I would say probably around, to the best of my recollection. Again, I'm sitting here today. I may have to come back and correct this. I would say 2022. Okay, how about Steve Sarowitz? Steve I met much later. Actually, I don't recall when I first met Steve. Yeah, I apologise. I don't recall when I met Steve for the first time. Do you have any recollection of when you first learned of Steve Sarowitz, of his existence? Oh, of course, when I was brought on. And then we jump to page 340. So stuff is being read in. I think they're reading in some stuff. Messages, possibly with James Vatuska. Wasn't his story, meaning James. Then reads, no, it's not his name. Fuck, ours is way better. Did you see that? Yes. Meaning our story that Mr. Nathan is communicating? Again, it could be one that she contributed to, meaning we were getting incoming commentary, asking for commentary. We were balancing stories left and right. You really were not told that Tag was placing a story with the Daily Mail? No, I was not. And actually, I would like to add to that not only were we not told, we were given explicit instructions from our client to not place any story that was negative about Blake or otherwise. Our main focus was to mitigate the negative press that was breaking organically from the press tour. Ms. Abel, on the next page with 520 at the top, do you see the text message between Ms. Nathan and James Vatuska? And it cuts off there. Okay, let's go to... Okay, so we do have a very brief deposition transcript. It's literally one page from Tera Hanks, the president of Wayfarer. I am going to do it because it's unsealed currently, so why not? Okay, so this is Tera Hanks answering a question. In my experience, talent hires crisis when they feel they need that support. Stephanie Rosa is doing the questioning. Did you have an understanding as to whether Mr. Baldoni felt in July of 2024 that he needed crisis support? Yes. And what is your understanding of why Mr. Baldoni felt that he needed crisis support in July of 2024? We were concerned. He was concerned about the cast unfollowing him and not doing press and promo in support of the film, and that there could be negative press about the film that could take away from the success of the film. Was he also concerned, to your knowledge, that there would be negative press about him individually? He was concerned about press, negative press for the film. I don't think you answered my question. Was Mr. Baldoni also concerned, to your knowledge, that there might be negative press about him individually apart from the film? And then it cuts off at, he was concerned when the cast unfollowed. Right, okay. Let's go back and another one. Melissa Nathan. And then we'll finish up with Steve Sarowitz. These aren't long at all. So this is Melissa Nathan's deposition. Starting on page 111. Question. Okay, do you see in the overview how the document says, and then she reads, there are several potential scenarios at play here, which we should be prepared for should BL and her team make their grievances public? Yes. BL and her team refers to Blake Lively and her team? Yes. Who did you understand Miss Lively's team to be at this time? Leslie Sloan and her publicist. Okay. Who else besides Leslie Sloan did you understand to be Miss Lively's team? I didn't know anyone else. Okay. Do you see the next sentence says, and then it's read, given she was made to compromise with the premiere, we feel she will move forward with doing so. Do you see that? Yes. It was Tag's view that you all believed that Miss Lively and her team would make her grievances public. Again, this is scenario planning, so this is a possibility. This is not definitive. Right. I mean, the scenarios. I didn't really ask if you thought it was definitive that she would do so. I'm just saying that what you're describing here in this first paragraph is there are scenarios that we need to be prepared for should she make her grievances public. Absolutely. And then we believe, given that she was made to compromise with the premiere, that she will move forward with doing so. Do you see that? Yes. So all I'm asking you was it your view, or Tag's view at least at the time, that Miss Lively was going to make her grievances public? Is that right? No, she could. You keep on saying that it's my view. This is like, she could have made, yes. And then he starts to read something, we feel she will move forward, and then it cuts off there. So, let's go and see what the next one is. Hold on, it might be up here. No, it's not. So there's a lot, obviously there's an awful lot of transcript that is still sealed. That will come in part 3 and multiple parts actually. So this is going to be the last one for this video. This is Steve Sarowitz. So we've got Ellen Garofalo and Mike Gottlieb in the room. There'll be other people. Clarify, there are loads of lawyers in the room, but when the deposition, the questioning is actually taking place, we've got one person who is speaking for the client being deposed, and then the other person who is speaking for the opposition, the person who is doing the questioning. So everyone else in the room is not talking. Well, either you'll have one specific counsel who will interject and say objection, or as we've seen with Alexandra Shapiro in Jamie Heath, in Justin Baldoni's deposition, it was, can you let him speak? Well, that might have been Jamie Heath actually. I don't know, it might have been both. So Ellen is here with Steve Sarowitz, and Mike Gottlieb is the one who is doing the questioning, and we are starting page 48. It looks like Ellen is saying something, giving advice, I think, to Steve Sarowitz. So she says, again, other than advice you may have been provided by attorneys, you can answer. Gottlieb then he is quite snippy. I'm not asking for your conversations with your lawyers. As you sat in the boardroom as a board member, I imagine a proposal was presented. It's a serious proposal. It meant shutting down an organization that I imagine you'd given a lot of time and money to. And all I'm trying to ask is why you decided to do that. Sarowitz, one of the deciding factors was death threats against both me and my family as a result of this litigation. So we'll all remember that Steve Sarowitz was, he was threatened. They threatened to kidnap his daughter for a ransom of $80,000. And they said something, they left in the note or the text message that he received says something to the tune of, if you're prepared to spend $100 million it was $80 million, wasn't it? If you're prepared to spend $100 million to ruin the lives of Miss Lively, then I'm sure you'll be prepared to spend this much to get your daughter back. We also tried to set fire to his home. So there was a lot going on. And he's saying here, well, one of the deciding factors, I'm assuming to set where they've shut down the Wayfarer Foundation because the charity shut down. One of the deciding factors was death threats against both me and my family as a result of this litigation. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. If I think I know the context, I do like to say, I think this is what this is about. Question. And as a result of those threats, sorry, what else did you want to say? And arson at my house. And that informed the decision to shut down the foundation in what way? You were asking me about my personal opinion, correct? I was asking you why you made the decision to support closing the foundation. Well, as I said before, the board made a decision and then you asked me about then we jumped to page 52. This is partway through a question. Have those threats been made to your knowledge against other employees, directors? Let's start with employees. Are you aware of any threats that have been made to employees of the foundation? There was a threat made to the foundation itself. And what was that threat? I don't recall the exact threat, but I remember we had to get security, and it was during the course of this litigation where, I want to say this very clearly, anti-Semitism was weaponized against me and everything I was associated with, even though I'm a Baha'i. and it was weaponized violently and purposefully. And as someone who lost 20 members of my family in the Holocaust and was beaten up for being Jewish when I was a child, lost my great-grandfather who I'm named after, I don't appreciate that. And I want to go on record as saying that the religious prejudice has no place in America. He's right, but I do like the fact that he's taken the opportunity to give Gottlieb a moral speech. I wonder if where he's referring to anti-Semitism being weaponized against him, it's the mischaracterization of the, Israel protected itself from Hamas quote, which was wildly misrepresented. Now we have heard the actual recording and the context around it. It was nothing like it was portrayed for many months. And we are currently in a situation where there is conflict between Israel and Palestine. When I say Palestine, obviously I'm referring to Hamas, the terrorist organization. And, because he made that comment, in this particular, political time of conflict, it could quite easily have stoked anti-Semitism. I could see that, and that's to be quite frank, that's awful. And it was and Lively would have known she was doing that as well. She would have had to have been. I'm not saying she's not a complete idiot, but she would have had to have been a complete idiot at minimum to have not known that. We're literally in a time of conflict when there's tensions around the world. And people are, even in the UK, there are all these marches and, protests and various things between, pro-Israel and then pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine groups. And it's just the violence and the discord and everything is awful to live in. It's a horrible time to live in. And I think that may have been what he was referring to, that the way that the statement was portrayed, falsely portrayed, that it may have stoked, I could imagine it would have stoked a lot of outrage from pro-Palestine supporters. I certainly saw, some other content creators talking about that quote when it was in filings, in a very negative light. So, and it turned out it was not what it was portrayed. So, question. Sorry, I just had to I did want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit. I think that needs to be kind of just context. Question. So back to Gottlieb, and I appreciate all that, and I'm deeply sorry that occurred. You caused it. I'm also a descendant of Holocaust survivors, so I don't appreciate it either. Are you kidding me? It was your filings. You wrote it in the filings. Oh my God. Unbelievable. I'm trying to understand the link between the threats you received and your decision respecting the foundation. I think I understand you to be saying that the link is this threat that the foundation itself received. Am I understanding you correctly? In addition to personal death threats, in addition to the death threats and kidnapping threats and arson against my family, the foundation also received a threat as a direct result of this litigation because of the actions taken by the people within this litigation, which were purposefully leveled against me and my family. Fantastic. That's Sarowitz clapping back at Gottlieb. He's saying, well, I had all these threats because of the actions taken by the people within this litigation, which is pretty much what I just said. But I love that it's here. I love that he said it to Gottlieb. And it's written down and video captured, but written down in a deposition transcript, and I'm sitting here reading it. Gottlieb, as a direct threat, that anti-Semitic threats against you and the Wayfarer Foundation, you said, I think you just testified, are direct results of actions taken by people in this litigation. Objection. Yes. By which people? I don't know who authorized it, but I know it was done by someone on the other side. What was done by someone on the other side? And then we jump to page 98. Oh, I would have loved to have seen how that played out. So, Gottlieb, that doesn't surprise you? No, it does not. You're the financier of Wayfarer Studios? Yes. Your co-founder? Yes. Is Wayfarer Studios an LLC? I believe so. Who are the members? I don't recall. Who are the shareholders? Objection. The major shareholders are Justin and myself. Do you know what the... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have something else you want to say? Okay. Do you know what the ownership percentages are as of... Let's start with today between you and Mr. Baldoni. Not exactly. Do you have a rough estimate? Then he jumps to page 103, partway through a question. And Gottlieb just says my question first. I don't know what came before that. Sarowitz. I don't recall. You don't recall anything that... Do you dispute saying that? Objection. No. Do you recall giving an interview that is on YouTube entitled Billionaire Steve Sarowitz on Wealth, Philanthropy and Ethical Success in August of 2024? Yes. Do you recall saying about Mr. Heath that you could pull rank on him because it's your money in October of 2024? I don't recall the exact context. Is that true? Is what true? That the money in Wayfarer Studios is your money? Yes. And is it true that, in effect, allows you to pull rank on Mr. Heath if you choose to do so? That's too broad. And then I think they jumped to page 120. So Gottlieb's reading something, a chunk of it, the first part of it's missing, so we're just going to go from here. The truth about Baldoni and Wayfarer. His lawyer says he was barely involved with the film. Besides providing the funding, he only visited the set twice and was not involved in the PR for the film. Do you see that? Yes. Is all of that accurate? Yeah. Oh, wait. Could you ask me specifically? Are you asking me specifically about the statement that we provided, or are you asking me about the previous thing? Could you tell me if what you're asking me is accurate? For clarification, is everything after through his lawyer accurate? Can you read specifically the words? Because I want to make sure this is a very important point. Is it accurate that you were barely involved in the film besides providing its funding? Yes. Is it accurate that you only visited the set twice? Yes. Is it accurate that you were not involved in the PR for the film? Yes. And all of that that was all of the information that was provided in response to the third allegation. Is that right? I don't recall. In other words, you don't see here anywhere that it's actually false that I provided input and ideas on ways to negatively influence the narrative against Ms. Lively. That's not true. You don't see that anywhere in here, do you? It's implied very strongly by this answer. By saying I'm not involved with the PR, that I would not, since I wasn't involved with the PR, which is correct, that I would not have provided ideas. Also, we never did a smear campaign. Well, I was not involved in this, and I was not involved in that, but also there was never a smear campaign. Love it. He's always got to make sure it's down, because then it's down. So it's implied strongly that's your testimony, right? It's my testimony that I never gave any input on ideas or ways to negatively influence the narrative against Miss Lively and her family. It's my testimony that I never did that, then or now. Never? Correct. Even after litigation was commenced? Correct. How do you define negatively? Objection. It's my testimony that the sole intent was to use my money to promote the truth about Baldoni and Wayfarer. So if I were to take out the word negatively from this sentence and ask you, did you ever provide input and ideas on ways to influence the narrative, and then I modify against and have it be about? Let me read it the way I'm modifying it. And then I will ask you the question. Did you ever provide input and ideas on ways to influence a narrative about Miss Lively and her family? Objection. No. You never provided any ideas about ways that the media narrative about Mr. Reynolds could be influenced at any time? I don't recall. Do you want to spend a minute and think about it? Sounds like he's speaking to a child. That's something I would say to my little girl. Do you want to have a minute on thinking time? Think about what you've done. There was one time that I suggested that we should point out, after Miss Lively had said that Ryan Reynolds rewrote a scene, that we should point out that there was a scene written by a female writer. That was the sole time I remember. And why did you point that out? I don't recall. What influence would it have in coverage of the dispute to point out there was a female writer? Objection. I don't know. Really? Objection. That's really your testimony as you sit here today. You really don't know why it would have mattered if there had been coverage that followed the suggestion that you made? Objection. I don't know what the, I think we're jumping a page. Yeah, we're jumping a few pages. I don't know what and then you jump to page 126, halfway through a question, had made on it ends with us by Q2, so that's second quarter of 2025. How would I figure that out? I don't know. You really cannot think of a single piece of paper or document or file I could look at that would tell me that. Objection. I'm not involved in the day-to-day running of Wayfarer. I imagine you would talk to Wayfarer management and ask them. No one provided any kind of report to you in the ordinary course of your duties and responsibilities as the co-chairman of the studio that told you how much money this movie made? I don't recall. Do you recall giving interviews in which you talked about how much money the movie made opening weekend? Yes. Do you recall how much? No. Do you recall it being more than you anticipated? Yes. And then we jump to page 137. Sarowitz is answering, yes. I don't know what he's answering. And that is I'm imagine genuine sentiment you were expressing to Mr. Baldoni. Yes. And you recall being very proud of the success of this movie in its opening days, right? Yes. Okay, and you say, and he reads, your interviews have been sterling. Do you see that? Yes. And you thought they were sterling? Yes. Did you participate in any of the preparation in advance of Mr. Baldoni's interviews? No. Did you yourself did some interviews in the first couple of weeks that the film was released, is that right? Can you be more specific? Sure. Did you do any media interviews in the conjunction with the release of It Ends With Us? So, the let's call it the first couple of weeks of August 2024, not specifically. Did you do any media interviews that occurred around that time? Yes. And did you prepare for these interviews with the assistance of any people in advance of your interviews? Sorry, I'm not trying to hesitate. I'm just trying to remember. Not really. Did you ever receive any kind of talking points or briefing materials in advance of the media interviews you were doing in the first 2 weeks of August 2024? Not that I recall. Did you ever discuss with Mr. Baldoni in advance of doing the interviews that you did what might be asked and what you might say? Yes. Okay, I'll come back to that. We then jump to page 146. My throat is my throat's hurting so much now. It's going to be my last video today. I'll do text messages tomorrow, I think. Okay, question. Who did you ask? Ask what? Who did you ask the question to? Did we have any idea that this would be promoted this way? I never asked. You never asked anyone that question? Correct. Okay, did you ever review any of the marketing materials for the film that were created by Wayfarer Studios? No. Did you ever review any of the marketing materials for the film that were created by Sony? No. Have you ever seen any marketing materials of any kind about the film that were created or influenced or edited by Miss Lively? I was not involved in the marketing, and so therefore you would have no way of knowing whether Miss Lively had any involvement at all in how the film was marketed. I was told that Miss Lively and Sony took over the marketing by Jamie. Would it surprise you to learn that every document that has been produced in this case that, and then we jump. I want to know. I really want to know what every document produced showed. So we're jumping and we're Gottlieb's reading something into Sarowitz, but we're halfway through whatever he's reading. Paying for the PR teams. That's you loving me and I appreciate you. Sarowitz, yes. Was Wayfarer paying for the PR teams? I don't know the details. I literally don't. Would you have to approve that before Wayfarer hired a PR team? No. And in this case, you were aware that TAG was retained to perform crisis communication services. Is that correct? Yes. For the reasons I've already stated, I can go through them again if you'd like. Well, that's not my question. Did you approve the hiring of the agency group? No. Were you asked your opinion on it before they were retained? No. Did you vet the agency group before they were retained? No. Did you have any conversation with Melissa Nathan before they were retained? No. How about street relations? Are you familiar with street relations? Yes. You are aware that street relations was at one point retained by Wayfarer? Yes. Were you asked for your view on that retention? I don't recall. Did you approve, strike that. Did you speak with Jed Wallace, the head of street relations, before street relations was retained? I don't recall. Do you recall anything about the retention of street relations? They were retained in regards to... Actually, let me change my answer. No, I was not consulted before they were hired. I just had to remember. I just had to remember. Okay, what did you just remember? I just remembered when they were hired. Are we skipping? No, it continues. Because at that point, I was not involved in the day-to-day. Okay, when were they retained? I believe, I'm not 100% sure, sometime around August of 2024. And how? I wasn't involved in that decision. How do you recall learning about that? I don't recall. What do you recall learning about street relations? Not 100% sure because we've been through this case for, I guess it's been a year now, that we've gone through this. And so there's been a lot that's been reported. So in my memory, it might be a little confused. But to my knowledge now, I'm not sure if I knew it then. Street relations was monitoring the negative press against us that was being put out by the Lively camp. What does that mean, monitoring? Helping with our crisis PR. So what does it mean to monitor social media or PR or press? Ellen then objects. And we jump to page 169. In the middle of a question made about you that you believe to be defamatory. Again, sorry, I'm just trying to get clarification. I'm not trying to be difficult. During the course of the complaint or as part of the complaint, would that be considered? Since that was public in the New York Times and Ms. Lively was the source of that statement, would that count? That's for you to tell me. Would that? And then Ellen steps in. Why don't you answer the question with what you believe she publicly said through the New York Times? Sarowitz. Okay. Through the New York Times, in the course of the complaint, it was said that I was on set for a scene where she was scantily clad and that I was a non-essential person. While I might have technically been non-essential, I did invest $30 million and paid for her salary, or at least my share of it, as well as the other actors, and I consider that to be essential. Fair dues. He's got a good point. Miss Lively considers that not to be essential. She can send me a check. I can give her an address or you can give it to her, but beyond that, I was not on set for that scene. And although I don't have direct, and then it cuts off, we go to page 172, but I love the clap back. Right. Gottlieb. That's all I'm interested in is how your understanding of how you, Steve Sarowitz, were personally defamed and what she testified to in her deposition. We're going to bracket that. Okay. I think I understood you to say you believe that there were things in the CRD complaint and the New York Times article that you found to be defamatory about you. Yes. Okay, and the example you gave of that, I believe, was an allegation about a time when it was alleged that you were on set for a scene where Miss Lively was acting out the scene of giving birth. Is that right? Yes. I want to add one other thing to what I said. Okay. It was insinuated that I went on set for particularly that scene. I didn't know what scenes were being filmed. Again, I wasn't on set for that scene, but I did not. It was insinuated that I went on set for that particular scene. Of course, like I said, I wasn't on set for that particular scene, and I also made no conscious decision to see Miss Lively in any particular thing because it wasn't important to me. Were you on set that day, the day that scene was shot? Yes. And how do you know that? I didn't know it at the time. I was told later in a conversation with someone who was there that, oh yeah, that set was that scene. Because I said, what about that scene? Oh, that it was filmed before you got on set. And there would be records, right? That would show that you traveled to New Jersey. Is that right? Yes. And those travel records would presumably show us when you arrived and when you left. I assume so. Do you have a calendar or diary that you keep? By diary, I mean a calendar. Do you keep a calendar? I do, but it wouldn't specifically say which scenes I was there for. But wouldn't the calendar have for, and then, then we jump a few pages to page 177. Question. Okay. And then would the same be true for intentional negligent interference with prospective economic advantage? Not about you personally. I'm not as certain on that one. I'd have to know more on that one. I'd have to know more on that one. I need more detail. The other one, no. That one, possibly. As you sit here today, what is your understanding of the factual basis for intentional and negligent interference with prospective economic advantage against, for example, let's start with Mr. Reynolds. And the reason I'm hesitating is I'm not sure where Wayfarer ends and I start. I don't know why the lawyers sued the way they did. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not really an expert on the law. But I can talk about damages done to Wayfarer, of which I am the majority owner, and that would have a negative economic advantage to me as an individual. I don't know if that's what you're asking me. I'm not asking you questions about damages to Wayfarer. I'm asking you about the claims you personally raised. And then it jumps to page 183. Answer, yes. And the document that follows this, that begins on page 34943. So to the best of your knowledge, the Wayfarer Studios employee handbook. Yes. And you're familiar with this document, right? Your name is on the first cover page of this at 34943. I'm not familiar with every detail. A lot of times I will sign things at a high level. I'm not involved in the day-to-day, but I'd be familiar that there is the document. Okay, you see on page 34943, the first page of the document after the text, so the first page of the attachment. Yes. Do you see that on the page at the top it says, and then he reads, so glad you joined us, and at the bottom it's signed Steve Sarowitz and Justin Baldoni, co-chairman. Yes. Okay, and there is references here to this being the employee handbook, right? Yes. And do you have a recollection of signing off on maybe not every word of this, but at some point in time signing off on an employee handbook for Wayfarer Studios? I don't recall. Do you have any recollection of ever seeing this letter that your name is on here? I don't recall. If you flip through the table of comments on pages Heath 3944 through Heath 34945, have you ever looked at this? As you look through table of contents, have you ever looked through the policies and procedures that are contained within this handbook? No. Okay. Well, let's look through some of the policies because I think they're quite commendable. On page 4 of the document, which is Heath 34946, do you see a reference in the values to the Wayfarer Studios being a Baha'i-inspired organization? I don't get the issue with whether Wayfarer is a Baha'i-inspired organisation or not. I don't see the point of these particular questions. So what? No one was forcing Blake Lively to become Baha'i. We jump to page 195, in the middle of an answer. What would it's not just saying anything that anyone says, but things like, for example, unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favours, some very specific things. Sure. Not just anything anyone would term. So I don't want to broadly say that anything that anyone perceives to be sexual harassment could actually be sexual harassment, but rather things as in here a condition of an individual's employment. So in other words, if someone were to be asked for sexual favours, or if someone were to say like it's very typical in Hollywood, that would be definitely sexual harassment. Fair enough, Mr. Sarowitz. If I worked for you and I wanted to understand what's our sexual harassment policy, I imagine you would tell me. Take a look at this document, right? Objection. I wouldn't be the one answering that question. If you were. Objection. But I wouldn't be, so it's conjecture. Is it fair to say that if I wanted to understand that Wayfarer Studios' sexual harassment policy was that this is the place I would look? This document is the place I would look to understand that policy. Objection. I'm not 100% sure how it would be handled since I don't handle the day-to-day operations. Do you understand that Wayfarer Studios' policy explains that? And then he reads, sexual harassment may include a range of subtle and not so subtle behaviours and may involve individuals of the same or different gender. Objection. That's from our policy, correct? That's a piece of our policy. Yes. Are you aware of whether anyone on the set of It Ends With Us advised Mr. Baldoni that his behaviour was unwelcome? That's too broad a topic. Can you say more specifically, what? Do you know if at any time during the filming of It Ends With Us, anyone advised Mr. Baldoni that he had engaged in behaviour that was unwelcome? I just can't. It's too broad. You don't know? I wasn't there. I don't have any first-hand, as you said before about the other things. I don't have first-hand knowledge. I wasn't there. Do you have any information at all? Were you ever told that anyone told Mr. Baldoni that he had engaged in conduct that was unwelcome, and a request that it be discontinued? Objection. To the extent that it calls for information you learned from lawyers, in which case you are instructed not to answer. You may otherwise answer. Sarowitz. Attorney privilege. Gottlieb. So you're saying, other than what you've learned from your attorneys, you're unaware of anything. Correct. Other than what you've learned from your attorneys, for example, you never had a conversation with Mr. Baldoni where he told you that someone on the set had told him that his behaviour was unwelcome. I don't recall. Are you aware, other than what you've learned from your attorneys, whether any member of the cast or crew ever asked Mr. Baldoni to discontinue a behaviour or type of conduct on the set? Other than what I learned from my attorneys, I am not aware of anything. Okay, you've never seen anything from Wayfarer's own documents or your own text messages? I don't recall. That's outside of what I talked to my attorneys about. Okay, so you don't know one way or the other, and then it cuts off and jumps to page 202. Sounds like Sarowitz has just been asked a question, and we're just getting the bit at the very end. It ends with us. He says, I don't recall. Was there ever a time, again prior to this litigation, where you learned that someone on the set raised concerns that Mr. Baldoni's behaviour was inappropriate during filming? I'm not aware of any HR complaints that were raised, or any SAG complaints that were raised by his behaviour. Well, that's an interesting way of distinguishing the question. It's factual. Because that's precisely how your PR people talked about it to the press. So my question to you, sir, was not about HR complaints or SAG complaints. Okay, so My question to you is whether, and I will reread it if I can find it. My question to you was whether you ever became aware, prior to this litigation, of anyone on the set raising concerns that Mr. Baldoni's behaviour during filming was inappropriate. I don't recall. Do you see if it is it fair to say that under the Wayfarer Studios policy, the thing you want your employees to do when they feel like they have experienced this type of prohibited behaviour is promptly advise the offender that his or her behaviour is unwelcome and request that it be discontinued? Objection. You can answer. Yes. And what is supposed to happen when an individual follows that policy to the letter? Objection. Although I'm not responsible for this because I'm not the one actually implementing this, the behaviour should stop. That would not be my individual responsibility as an individual. The reason the policy is written this way is because the hope is by promptly reporting it and asking for that behaviour to be discontinued, whoever's doing it will stop, right? Objection. I would not be personally involved, but that would be the hope. That's your understanding of the purpose of this policy, right? Yes. And under the next section, under supervisor and manager responsibility states, sorry, I am really losing my voice. In Gottlieb reads, if any supervisor or manager becomes aware of a violation of this policy, they are obligated to report the violation to Human Resources Management so Wayfarer Studios can investigate and, if appropriate, take corrective action. Do you see that? Where's that at? In the section entitled Supervisor and Manager Responsibilities. Okay, yes. Did you supervise or manage any people at Wayfarer Studios during the filming of It Ends With Us? No. Did Mr. Heath? Yes. And then we jump to page 210. Halfway through a question, before Ms. Garofalo was your lawyer, right? Yes. You learned about that completely independently of anything that would fall within an attorney-client privilege because you learned about it in 2023, right? Objection. Not completely independently. You knew in 2023 that Ms. Lively's legal team had sent a list of protections for return to production, and you talked about it with Mr. Baldoni, didn't you? I'm trying to answer this honestly, so give me a second to describe what I think of that list. We all know what you think of the list, Mr. Sarowitz, and we all share the feeling. Okay. I believe that Miss Lively sent a list of things that she insinuated we did, which we never did. And that forced us basically, after millions of dollars were invested to the movie, to sign a list of things that we would do no more, that were never done as a ploy to take over the movie, which she eventually did. So yes, I believe that Miss Lively did send a list of demands for her return to work, and we did sign the list. But when we signed it with the understanding that we did not agree that we'd actually done those things. What did you do, since you're stating with some amount of conviction that the actions described in that list did not occur and were, as you just said, a ploy? What did you do to satisfy yourself that what you just said is factual? Objection. He rephrases. How did you satisfy yourself that those behaviors or activities or compliance or whatever you would like to call them did not occur? As I've stated previously, the two main things that she said about me are complete or partial lies. That is my direct experience. She accused me of being in a scene, at a scene which I was not at. She said she was scantily clad. An actor who was on set with her testified she was not. Publicly testified she was not scantily clad. And then, throughout the course of this case, the evidence has come out that much of what she said was not true, or partially true, or twisted to make it seem worse. For example, she said that Justin said, Wayfarer Studios will maintain appropriate documentation and tracking to ensure that reasonable progress is made. Oh, I think we've jumped. Oh, we skipped over a page, right? Okay, so something's been read in. Wayfarer Studios will maintain appropriate documentation and tracking to ensure that reasonable progress is made. Sarowitz replies yes. Did that happen with respect to what occurred on set in It Ends With Us? Objection. The two ways that a formal complaint would, I'm not aware of any formal complaints of any allegations being made either to, as I mentioned before, either to SAG or to HR. So your answer is you're not aware of any investigation of this type referenced on the document with the Bates number 34949 taking place. I'm not aware of any reported allegations. What's a formal report? Typically again, I'm not an expert on this, I don't manage sets, but what I've been told and what I have learned through the course of this case is that the two options, if there was, and then we jump to page 217. Something is being read in by Gottlieb. Favors sexual abuse of a sexual nature, commentary about an individual's body, sexual prowess, or sexual deficiencies. Yes. Also, sexual jokes, innuendo, leering, whistling, or touching, insulting or obscene comments or gestures, display in the workplace of sexually suggestive objects or pictures, and other physical, verbal, or visual conduct of a sexual nature. Is that a good description of what can constitute sexual harassment under Wayfarer's policy? That's what the policy says. Do you have any knowledge of whether any conduct of that type occurred on the set of It Ends With Us? I have no knowledge of any of that. Okay, you don't know one way or the other. I have no knowledge of any of that ever occurring. It's my belief that none of that ever occurred on set. Okay, I have no direct knowledge. So if an investigation is not conducted and if an employee believes their complaint is not resolved, what does the policy say the employee or covered person should do? Objection. Do you need time to read the policy? Can you point me to that? Take a look at the section that says violations of this policy. Okay, got it. Do you see the paragraph that begins with employees? If employees believe their complaint is not resolved, do you see that? So what you're saying is if anything actually occurred, Ellen then says, take a minute. Yeah, I should. And read it, and then you can respond. And then we jump to page 221. It sounds like Gottlieb is asking something about Baldoni. Sarowitz. I'm not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Complaints describing unwelcome behaviour. I'm not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Okay. And can I answer a little bit more? Sure. I believe that after there were no further complaints. There are no further complaints after the 17 points. So even after very early on in filming, I was not aware of any complaints. And I'm not aware of any written complaints, any HR complaints. I'm not aware of any unresolved complaints. Okay. Are you? Sarowitz. I know that there was insinuated, but I am not aware of any unresolved complaints. Are you aware of any investigation that took place into any conduct that took place on the set of It Ends With Us prior to this litigation? I am not aware of any complaints that necessitated an investigation prior to this investigation. So the answer to my question is no. And then we jump to page 224. Gottlieb's reading something in, and the only part of it is investigated and addressed. Do you see that? Yes. And we've already established that there was no investigation of any kind prior to the initiation of litigation in this case. Is that correct? I'm not aware of any event that would facilitate or require an investigation. So as I've said before, I am not aware of any event that would have required an investigation. And one thing I forgot to mention before is that we had talked to counsel and there was no event that they felt would require an investigation. Who's we? Jamie and Justin. And I don't really know. I wasn't involved in that conversation. Well, how did you just remember this? I knew about it before. I had forgotten to say it before. The counsel that also verified along with our own, there was There was no need for an investigation. Are we jumping? Yes, we're jumping to page 230. Sarowitz is answering. These expensive things occurred throughout the production. So when these things occurred, I can't tell you exactly when they occurred, but throughout the production. In addition to a lot of stress, in addition to people being fired. Sorry, go ahead. And the 17-point list essentially served very effectively, in my opinion. And I will give her a lot of credit for this, as essentially a knife to our throat throughout all of this. So she could get away with the crime she got away with. I thought you weren't involved in the production of the film. Correct. You only visited the set twice, right? Isn't that what your lawyer told Forbes? That's what I told Forbes. And that's what I'm telling you. I only visited the set twice. That's the truth. That's the truth. Well, you just used the word we a lot in that speech you gave. Well, of course it's his money. Jesus. And so what I'm wondering is, were you involved in the production of the film, or are you using the word we describing Wayfarer Studios? Objection. I'm using the word we as in the entity Wayfarer Studios, of which I am the majority investor. Not that I was individually involved in any of the actions. Not that I have personal knowledge of any of this. Not that I was involved in any of this personally or have any individual knowledge. However, the effects have hurt me, as have hurt the company and myself as an owner of the company in that respect. What I'm trying to get at, Mr. Sarowitz, is did you, about with respect to Mr. Lively's allegations and whatever label you want to give the sort of content of the 17-point list, okay? I don't want to fight over whether they're allegations or claims or whatever they are. But the substance of what is in the 17-point list, did you know anything about the events described from first-hand knowledge? Objection. No. Did you know anything about what was described in that document other than what you had learned from Mr. Baldoni? Objection. Is it possible we can review the 17-point list? We are going to get to a document in a minute, but as you sit here today, your understanding of what was happening on set, which you have testified you weren't there every day, you visited twice, you weren't involved in the production. Do you ever recall learning anything about what was going on the set other than from Mr. Baldoni? Yes. Okay, what else do you recall as you sit here today? I talked to Brandon Sklar. I talked to Brandon Sklar when I was on set, and he was effusive in his praise for Justin, his directing, Wayfarer, how he'd been treated in general. So I met with him personally on the day I was on set. Which of the 2 days? The first day I was on set. Okay. My own experience from that day on set was that I did not witness anything untoward, but I would not have. Again, I was only on set twice, so that's what I would know firsthand. Okay, and so you had a conversation that you can recall from Mr. Sklar, which was very positive about his experience. Effusive, yes. Effusive, your word. And you obviously had these conversations along the way with Mr. Baldoni. Is there anything else you can think of, as you're sitting here today, that any other person from whom you may have learned information about what was happening on set? Yes. Who was that? Jamie Heath. Okay, so you had conversations with Mr. Heath during production? Yes. And did you talk to Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni by phone from time to time during production? I don't recall, but I assume so. We are skipping a page and going to page 235. Sarowitz is answering correct. Question. Which was the first of the 2 days that you visited the set? Yes. Okay, how long would you say that interaction with Miss Lively took? A minute or two. Okay, anything else? I know this can be tedious, but anything else that you can think of in your head as you sit here today that informed your understanding of what had happened on set? I'm friends with one of the actors. Which one? Adam Monshine. Okay. And did you have conversations with Mr. Monshine about what was happening on set? Nothing negative. My question was, did you have any conversations with Mr. Mancini? Mr. Mancini? About what was happening on the set? Just his experience. And when did you talk to Mr. Mancini? I don't recall. Do you recall how many scenes in the movie Mr. Mancini was in? Why is he calling him Mr. Mancini? I don't know. Would it refresh your recollection if I told you one? Yeah, that sounds right to me. Do you know which scene he was in? Yes, he was in the birthing scene. Do you know what character he played? He played a doctor. The doctor that sat in between Miss Lively's legs while she was giving birth. Well, that's where doctors go. I wasn't there. Have you seen the movie? I have seen the movie. Is that what happens in the scene? I don't recall. Did you talk to Mr. Mancini before he went to act for that scene? No. Did you talk to him after that? Yes. What was the nature of your conversation? Just his experience. And what did he talk about it? Sounded like it was positive. Anything specific you can recall? No, I don't recall. Also, he confirmed my memory, which is that I wasn't there at that scene. When did that happen? During the course of litigation. After litigation, just double-checked and said I wasn't there for that scene. He said, oh no, I was there. When did that conversation take place? I don't recall. Do you know roughly, month that would have occurred in? I don't recall the exact month. Do you talk to him on the phone? Yes. Do you recall how long the conversation was? No. Did you talk to him about anything else? I don't recall. And so the nature of that call, to the best of your recollection, is that you asked him if he had a recollection of you being present for the birth scene, and he said he did not. I told my recollection, and again, this is going back to the court, that I told him I wasn't there for the birth scene, and am I wrong about that? And he confirmed that. And he said, yeah, you're right, you weren't there. Correct. Okay. Let's take a look at Exhibit 8. Exhibit 8, okay. Mr. Sarowitz, you've been handed a document as marked as Exhibit 8, which is a document bearing the Bates number Nathan 3767, and then an attachment that is produced in native format to this document. It's a little small for my old eyes. I think I also need to read this document. And then Ellen says he needs a microscope. This document is the first page of Nathan, obviously Exhibit 7, right? And the stenographer says 8. Ellen says, hold on, objection. Sarah says, I've seen a lot of evidence personally involving me and others that Miss Lively's perspective is false. And I think misleading, false, and misleading often, as I've mentioned with my own personal things in the deposition. I don't like to speak to others, but I can speak to the facts. The supposed facts she said about me were either misleading or completely wrong, and I believe on purpose. For example, Miss Lively said I was going to, or I was at a scene I was not at, insinuating for the entire world that I wanted to go and see a birthing scene because she was scantily clad, which I wasn't there, but I've heard she was also not scantily clad. Given my experience with Miss Lively, my personal experience with Miss Lively, and during her deposition, she insinuated I threatened to kill her and her husband, which I have never done. Oh my God, those quotes in that Claire Ayub secret recording. Blake Lively sat in her deposition and represented that they meant that he was trying to kill her and Ryan Reynolds. Are you fucking kidding me? And even in the evidence that they proffered in their own complaint, it very specifically says I did not threaten to kill them, and I was very clear about that, but she repeated it as such. Given the misleading things she said about me, I have every reason, and given my long-term friendship with Justin, where he has been sweet and kind to many, many people for many years, and his 19-year experience in the film industry with excellent relations with many people who I have met. Given my experience with both of them, I have reason to mistrust Miss Lively, direct reason to mistrust Miss Lively, and reason to trust Justin Baldoni. Understood. Isn't everything you and I just talked about reason why corporations do investigations when allegations arise? Objection. As I've stated before, I'm aware of any complaints that were lodged that would require an investigation prior to the actual CRD complaint. Do you see a reference on the next page of this chart to May 16th, 2023? There's a description of a meeting in BL trailer regarding wardrobe concern. And then there's another. And then we jump to page 260. Gottlieb, questions in your testimony. Were you aware that, have you seen what Miss Baker or Miss Carroll testified about this meeting on the 16th? No. Have you talked to any percipient witnesses to that event to come to an understanding of what occurred? No. So for all you know, Miss Lively's description of this event could be completely accurate. Given the lack of accuracy that I've seen by stenographer has misspelt seen by almost everything else that Blake Lively has said, I've come to doubt her veracity as a witness on almost everything she says. Given the things that I know, all the evidence I have seen over and over again. However, it is possible that she could be accurate on something as well. And to figure out whether she was accurate, you probably want to know what the eyewitnesses to the event thought, right? We have a whole legal team, and again, as I mentioned, I'm an investor in many companies. I don't get involved in the details, but the legal team is involved. Okay, we're going to go to attorney's eyes only for a second. We are not attorney's eyes only. Now we are. Okay. In her deposition, Miss Carroll testified about this event with Mr. Heath, and she said the following. So Gottlieb's reading in part of the makeup artist, I think. Makeup artist or nanny. Someone who was there at the meeting with Jamie Heath. Blake was having body makeup done in the trailer by Vivian, and we heard the door open and went, whoa, 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 and it was Jamie at the door. I grabbed a cutting cape, which was over my chair, and held it up to try and cover her, and Blake said, whoa, whoa, don't come in. And he said, it will only take a second. And that's when all of this action was happening. He stayed in the trailer, they had a discussion, and he left. And it continues. So we now jump into 265. Question, are you with me? Yes, I'm with you. No, that's okay, that's short enough, go ahead. Okay, are you aware that Miss Slate had complained to Mr. Baldoni about him calling her or referring to her as sexy around May 18th, 2023? I'm not aware of that. At any time prior to this litigation, did you become aware of that? No. Did you ever become aware that Miss Slate had gone to Mr. Baldoni and said, I don't like that comment, please stop? I don't know the details of that incident. Did you know that Miss Lively also around the same time complained to Mr. Baldoni about him referring to her as sexy? I'm not aware of that. Would you be interested in what Miss Slate, I recognise you've said you don't believe anything Miss Lively says or anything to that effect, or you find her credible, or you find her incredible. What about Miss Slate? I would not use the word incredible. Lacking in credibility when I say incredible. Is that a fair description of your views? Much better. Okay, what about Miss Slate? I'm aware that in the course of any production that there's issues. I'm aware that Miss Slate had an issue. I'm not aware of the specifics. I'm aware that it was resolved. And to my knowledge, there was nothing else brought up. So I'm aware that in the course of production, there can be issues. And I was aware that there was an issue with Miss Slate, that it was resolved. In determining whether there were problems on the set, would it be of interest to you to know Jenny Slate's perspective on what happened that day? Objection. I believe that it will be up to a jury during the trial. In other words, I don't have time to get into every detail. I'm the chairman. I don't have time to get into every detail. I think at some point in time, I'll have time. We've had kind of a whirlwind, 16-hour day thing with this case, in addition to the other work I do, which is quite expensive. And so I haven't had time to look in detail. At some point in time, as we get further into the trial, I may get more into the details, but most likely I'm not involved with the day-to-day operations. Would you have wanted to know if Miss Toskovich had showed you this back in August of 2024 and they said, hey, just so you know, Jenny Slate had a concern that she expressed to Justin on the set? Would you have wanted to know that? I was aware that Miss Slate had a concern and that the concern was taken care of, and I was not aware that there were further concerns. Okay, but you never talked to Miss Slate about that, I assume. Does everyone have to speak to someone who's raised a concern? Like, that's just not done. I have never talked to Miss Slate at all. Okay. I didn't see her at the premiere along with the other actors. I have never talked to her before or during the premiere. I have never seen her. I have never met her. Never spoken to her or met her. Have you read Miss Slate's testimony in her deposition in this case? I have not. Would you expect that Miss Slate's testimony about the sexy comment that had been made to Miss Lively would be similar or dissimilar from Lively's description? What? Objection. I wasn't there. I don't know. Would it matter to you? Objection. What would matter to me is that any problems or issues which occurred, as you mentioned, and I will repeat your words, nobody's perfect, Justin included. And if Justin said something that was inappropriate or anyone says something because in the course of filming a film largely about sex, about a novel that has a ton of sex in it, if the word sexy was used inappropriately in that context, I would hope that would be rectified. And I understand that nobody's perfect. I would expect that would be dealt with. And I was under the impression that it was dealt with and handled. And we jump to page 273. So I don't have enough information based on what you've told me as to how bad the problems were on set and what was done to resolve it based on the comments that you gave me. Are you aware of a meeting that took place in New York on January 4th, 2024 that Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath attended? I believe I've become aware of that through my attorneys. Have you ever heard that meeting described as an ambush? Objection to the extent that the question calls for attorney-client communications. He just testified he heard it from his attorneys. You are instructed not to answer. I'm not interested in what you may have learned from your attorneys. Did Mr. Baldoni or Mr. Heath ever describe that meeting to you as an ambush? I don't recall. Have you ever heard that meeting described as a HR complaints meeting? Not to my knowledge. Not to my recollection. Well, why don't you turn to page 12 of the document we're in? And look 5 lines down, it says page 12 at the bottom. I got it. Just getting there. Sorry, the rate numbers are not on this because it was produced in its native format. I've got this one. It looks like we're on the same page. That one you can read without my glasses. I can. And if you look 5 lines down where it says Chris Sargent, first AD during phase 2. Yep. Note says, and then he reads in. He was in the production planning meeting turned HR complaints meeting on January 4th, 2024. Do you see that? Who is Chris Sargent? All I know is what is written here. Yeah, I'm not familiar with this. Did you know that there was somebody at Wayfarer Studios who referred to the meeting that took place on January 4th, 2025 as the HR complaints meeting? I was never aware until this very moment that it was ever referred to as that. Let's mark another document. And the stenographer then says, Exhibit 9 for the record. The witness being Sarowitz, and I'm aware of any HR complaints that were filed. I'm unaware of any HR complaints that are filed. Mr. Sarowitz, you've been handed what's been marked as Exhibit 9. Exhibit 9 is a document bearing the Bates number Heath 35492 through Heath 35493. This is a text message exchange on May 28th, 2023 between Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni. You can take a minute to take a look. I got it. Okay, Mrs. Sarowitz, we just looked at that chart that had references to Miss Slate and Miss Lively and the sexy comments occurring between the first date we looked at. was around May 11th. And then the last date was around, I think we're jumping to page 283. Okay, I don't know what that top bit is. So Ellen is speaking. Okay, I'm going to withdraw my objections. We've clarified the issue and you can proceed with your questions on Exhibit 10. Gottlieb, all right. So, Mr. Sarowitz, you testified earlier today, but I think you'll correct me if I get this wrong, that you lost a significant amount of money on the film as a result of what you believe to be Miss Lively's conduct. Is that correct? Yes. And you put a dollar amount on that, what you thought you'd lost? Millions. I couldn't put an exact dollar. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't done it because I just looked at it as something I was not ever going to go after her for. And you said that you said you were going to go after her for other things. You asked me a question as to the things I was upset about. I'd listed them before. I don't know if you need me to list them out again, or can we go back to my previous answer? And then we jump to page 291, and Gottlieb's in the middle of a question. Return to production letter that we were discussing earlier. Sarowitz, yes. This is right around the time that the letter was circulated. Is that right? I don't recall, but perhaps. Did Wayfarer agree to meet these 17 conditions? Ultimately, we signed the letter under duress with a caveat saying that we didn't necessarily agree with it, but we signed the letter in order to get her back to work. But we had not done the things we had done in the first place and continued not to do the things that were in the letter. Mr. Gottlieb, I will move to strike as non-responsive. Of course you will. It's not what you want to hear. My question was just whether Wayfarer agreed to meet the 17 conditions, yes or no. We agreed to continue to not do the things we weren't doing. Was that letter of conditions something you considered to be sensitive? Objection. Can you be more specific? We jump to page 303. Ellen, I'm sure it is. Okay. Gottlieb, let's look at the exhibit that you have in front of you, sir, Exhibit 12. Exhibit 12 is a document bearing the Bates numbers Sarowitz 80 through 82. It's a text exchange on January 5th, 2024. And this is a text chain that appears to involve some of the same individuals as the exhibit we just looked at, I believe. But if you notice a difference, please tell me. I don't. Okay, so this is a text chain with some of the title at the top here. You see prayers and support. Is that the same title of is that the same title of the sort of text thread that we looked at, Exhibit 11? Yes. On January 5th, 2024, did Mr. Baldoni reach out to you to discuss the meeting that had just happened the day before on January 4th? Can I have time to familiarize myself with this document? Sure. Thank you. I don't recall. So you don't recall talking to Mr. Baldoni on or around January 5th about the meeting that happened in the apartment building with Miss Lively and Mr. Reynolds on January 4th? I know we talked at some point in time. I don't know the exact date we talked. Okay. You see, at 6:35 p.m. on January 5th, Mr. Baldoni sends a somewhat lengthy text message, which is on the page Sarowitz 80, and then follows that up at 6:45 on the page Sarowitz 81. Yeah, Is the description that you see here generally consistent with any conversation you ever had with Mr. Baldoni where he described the meeting to you like this? Objection. I don't recall. Do you have any recollection of when you the first time you learned about the January 4th, 2024 meeting? I don't remember exactly when I learned about it. And then we jump to page 311, and we're talking about Claire Ayub. So, in the middle of a question you had with Miss Ayub was before this occurred on September 27th, this conversation, or after? I don't recall. Were you asked to have a call with Claire Ayub? I know I did. I don't recall how it came up. Does it seem like the kind of thing that you would have affirmatively reached out on your own to request? She was coming to show her film at the theatre. I don't recall how the call came about. If we had your calendar from September or August of 2024, do you think we might find a Zoom meeting or meeting indication? Might we possibly find one with Miss Ayub? Yes. Do you recall knowing when you spoke to Miss Ayub that there had been any problems on the set of Empire Waste? I visited the set of Empire Waste and was not aware of any problems. Okay. But again, I don't run the day-to-day. Okay, we're going to go to Attorney's Eyes Only now. And we're going to mark as an exhibit the audio file that has the Bates number BL33428. The stenographer says Exhibit 14, Gottlieb. So we will mark as Exhibit 14 the document produced in its native format, has the Bates number BL33428. We're going to mark that. This is all you'll see with it. And before we start playing that, so this would be the recording, I'm guessing. And before we start playing that, Mr. Sarowitz, we have produced in this litigation a recording of this call. Have you received that production, the call you had with Claire? Are you? Yes. Have you listened to it? Yes. Have you listened to all of it? Yes. And I assumed you have listened to all of it because you earlier mentioned that you were seeking to have it de-designated, is that right? It was not my decision to de-designate it, but I'm okay with that decision. Okay, how many times have you listened to the call at this point in time? Once. Alright, we're going to play just a little bit of it to ask you if this is the call, and then we'll stop and I'll ask you some more questions. Well, so why don't we start? And then they play a bit. Gottlieb says, alright, let's stop. Is that your voice that you just heard saying it's been a long few weeks? Yes. And was the woman's voice speaking to you right before that, Miss Ayub's voice? Yes. And is that the recording of the call that we have just been talking about here, that I just played for you, a small clip of? Yes. Do you know who Elise that was referred? And then I think we jump to page 319. And then later in the page, as read, they went after everything we had. Luckily, I was out of it, so like nobody mentioned me. That's because I'm a nobody. In other words, referring to yourself. In other words, referring to myself. I wasn't very important. Okay, thank you for that. How was Mr. Heath stopping what you viewed as the worst of the worst from coming out? Objection. This is what our crisis PR people were working on, is stopping the public attacks on us, the ongoing everyday public attacks on us. Okay, do you recall later in the conversation discussing with Miss Ayub what had happened on the set of It Ends With Us? I don't think I could have because I wasn't on the set of It Ends With Us. But is there anything in the document which would talk about that? You weren't there. I was only there, as I mentioned, briefly for part of one day and just a few minutes on another, so I really wasn't on the set. Would it surprise you to learn that when Miss Ayub said, I wasn't there, so I don't know what it was like, your response was, I was? Can you refer me to the page? You don't have any recollection of saying that to Miss Ayub? I was there on set? Again, can you refer me to the page? Pages 30 to 31. Okay, just give me a second or two so I can read it and I will go through as quickly as I can because I realize we're running short on time. Thank you, sir. Okay. And you see that you made reference to there being two different sets, and Miss Ayub says, I don't know, I wasn't there, so I don't know what it was like, and you say I was, right? We will have to be... Do we jump? Yeah, we jump. Thought so. Then jumps to page 334, and they're still reading the transcript of that audio. We will have to be defensive for years. It talks about there will be stuff coming at us, so I believe, based on context, that this is very consistent with what I said before, that I would defend the studio. That's what I meant by that. He was explaining that he was not threatening Lively and Reynolds, he was referring to defending the studio. Do you understand the difference between defense and offense? Objection. Yes. Doesn't this go back to an earlier conversation we had about some of the tenets of your faith? Objection. Gottlieb, the distinction between self-defense and retaliation. Objection. Let me try that a different way, sir. And then they jump to page 352. Gottlieb, is saying I will never let up go enough to you for the rest of my career something that you want your attorneys to say to reporters at news organisations? Objection. Sarowitz, I don't know the context, so I can't comment on something I don't have the context. I don't know what was done. For example, in the course of this case, someone threatened my daughter's life. If I knew who did that, I would say something similar to that, even as a Baha'i, because we're not perfect human beings. I mean, I think the premise of the faith is to be as kind as possible, but not be pushed to breaking point and still have to put up and shut up. There are things that are beyond the pale and people get angry. I'm sure you, like me, have a temper and occasionally we say things we might even regret. So I would like to know what the whole context is before I can comment on it. Do you have any more context on this you can give me? Gottlieb, I do not. Your attorneys do. Did you ever learn of anything that horrific or terrible that Mr. Rice has done or said in public? Don't know who that is. Did you ever see anything that he said in, and then it ends there. Okay, so I'm going to end this video. This is the deposition transcripts that are currently unsealed, up to date. So the next ones will be part 3, when the when the deposition transcripts are unsealed. So thank you for listening. Go and check out part 1. That's just wild, as I know Brian Reynolds so well now. Yeah. And if you could like and subscribe and give me a hype, I would be appreciative of that. Thank you.